What's happening? Dr. Jeff, Rythmia Life Advancement Center, Chief Medical Officer, Master's in Public Health, Doctorate in Psychology, medical background. I want to read you guys a quote. Malice, scorned, puts out itself, but argued, gives a kind of credit to a false accusation. So, Philip Messenger lived from 1583 to 1640. He was an English dramatist. Messenger placed moral and religious concerns over political considerations in ways that offended the interests of the king and the state in his generation. While not a democrat in any modern sense, no one in his society was, Messenger's political sympathies, insofar as we can determine them from his works, might have placed him in a predicament similar to that of the head of the house he revered. Sorry. I'm thinking in Spanish and speaking in English. The Earl of Pembroke, who found that he could not support King Charles in the English Civil War and became one of the few noblemen to back the parliamentary side. Messenger did not live long enough to see what would play out in the position in his conflict. So, let me repeat that quote. Malice, scorned, puts out itself, but argued, gives a kind of credit to a false accusation. I love this. So, I'm going to get right into it. Dissociative Dilemma Part 2. Okay, so last week I talked to you guys about what happens when you have a certain way of existing in your life and you've unplugged from yourself. And I've had a lot of alumni contact me and say that really represents them. You know, it really, really does. Aloha, Brett. What's up, Bretta? And so I want to talk about what happens if you are this type of person. So if you have I just want to recap a little bit about last week. So if you went through trauma or you went through a certain way of upbringing under the age of 12, usually, is that you've unplugged from yourself and you're dissociated. And then the goal of life is to plug back in. Okay, so I didn't talk a lot about what that means last week, about if you are unplugged from yourself and you're dissociated and what can occur. So what happens is it becomes a really, really powerful tool for those that tune into it. Now, if you used your dissociative abilities to absorb the energy of somebody else, right, and understand who they are, that became a very valuable tool as a child. Because last time I checked, when you were 5 years old, you couldn't get in a car and drive off and get a new family, right? You couldn't choose a new school or get a new environment. You were the victim of your circumstances. So what that means is that you had to adapt. You had to use the tools that you were developing to survive. And so dissociated means, as a review, your physical self and your emotional and or spiritual self separate. And your spiritual self is nearby, it's close, but it's unplugged from your physical body. And your physical body becomes a vessel to absorb the energy of somebody else. Now, if somebody is projecting that energy, it's very easy. If they're not projecting it, you kind of have to work a little bit on trying to get them to give it to you. Like a teacher, you might have to work a little bit to get them to project onto you their vibe. So what happens is you're living, you're 5 years old and you're at home and your dad comes home. It's just an example, right? You might have had a great dad, but this is an example. Your dad might be drunk and abusive that night, or he might not be. He might be fine and loving and totally cool. But because you heard the car come into the driveway, you unplugged. And now you're a vessel to absorb his energy. And you feel his vibe. He's calm. Today was payday. Everything's okay. Okay, you can relax. You can stay in the room. You can watch TV. Everything's cool. Or he's been drinking. You sense a sense of chaos. You can feel it. So you know to go to your room. You know to be quiet. You know to avoid going outside of the room. Okay, and you learn how to do this, and it keeps you safe. And you use this absorption of people's energy to navigate your environment. It's the only real tool a kid has. A kid doesn't have the words. A kid doesn't have the emotional or the intellectual understanding. A kid doesn't have the empowerment, right, to do any of this. Talk to a foster kid. You guys ever talk to a foster kid? I used to work with foster kids in Hawaii. Guess what foster kids are? Foster kids are freaking badass. They are so in tune. They can read you like a book. They can tell if you're upset. You can tell if you're stressed. You can tell if you're tired. They can tell if you're hungry. My kids in Hawaii would say, "Oh, brah, let's go get some food. I can tell you're hungry." I'm like, dude, how do you know I'm hungry? Okay, because foster kids are jumping around from house to house to house to house. Some are good. Some are really cool. Some are not cool. Okay, so they've learned this tool. They've learned it, right? I got a kid. Well, he's not a kid. He's a married man with his own kids, who was one of my patients in Hawaii, who did amazing. And he's like so successful now. And it's a beautiful thing to see because he's used his tools in his life. And we would talk about it, right? Remove yourself, absorb the energy of other people, and diagnose what's going on. That's what you guys did as kids. And so now you're adults. Okay, so now you're adults. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you're an empath. It means that you have a lot of abilities to feel what's going on around you. The worst event for you in the world is a wedding. Because you know half the people, but the other half you don't know. You're mixed up with everybody. And guess what ends up happening at that wedding? Everybody tells you their life story. Everybody tells you their own problems they're going through. Strangers, right? Strangers. Okay, that's because you're in an unfamiliar environment with new people. So you unplug like you used to do as a kid. And then you're a vessel. And then people project their energy onto you. And then you absorb it and you diagnose it. That's how you can tell. What's up? Aloha to my Hawaii ohana. Danny, what's up, brother? And so what ends up happening, right, is that all of this energy that you're absorbing all the time to understand your environment, to understand the people around you, to understand the environments, what happens is it's a burden because you're not doing it consciously. You're not doing it willingly. You're doing it as a default mechanism. There's a very big difference. Doing it consciously on purpose and then doing it as a default mechanism that's just your way of existing. When it is just a default, it's just your way of existing. Oh my gosh. It's a burden. It's confusing. It's overwhelming. You get piled on top of you. Emotion after emotion after emotion after emotion. It's just brutal. You don't really know what's happening within the whole thing. When it is consciously done, it is totally cool. You can do it or turn it off. You can turn it on. You can turn it off. You know what's happening. But the problem is if you've learned and listened to everybody around you that it's not this way, that says that what you're thinking or talking about is crazy. Because how can you absorb somebody's energy? How can you understand somebody else? Well, guess what? I'll tell you guys a little secret. Psychology talks about this process. Okay, at the doctorate level, object relations, Freudian Model 3, projective identification, we talk about this. Okay, it's a strategy. It's a way to do therapy. Because if I go into a room as a therapist and I can remove myself from my own emotions and absorb the patient's feelings, I know who they are. I can deal with it. Okay, they're depressed. They're anxious. They have suicidal thoughts. They have schizophrenia. They have whatever. And I know it's not me. I know it's them. I can absorb it, understand it, diagnose it. I can do all kinds of therapeutic stuff in there. Okay, it's a strategy. It's an actual strategy. But nobody's taught this. Like cruising around, trauma therapy is about trying to let go of, with trauma therapy is like forgive the offenders, become empowered, learn to overcome whatever the heck they tell you. Okay, but what trauma therapy should be about is learning how to manage this ability, which is your ability to feel other people's energy and understand who they are and navigate your environment. That's what trauma therapy should be. That's what trauma therapy is when it's done right. Okay, so how do you navigate your world? If you can absorb all this energy from people because you can unplug, right? You can feel their vibe, and you think it's like you're told that you shouldn't have this belief that you can feel somebody. Well, that's physics, okay? So you can go talk to a physics professor, which I took a couple years at UCLA about. You can feel their energy, okay? You can feel it, okay? You can absorb it, you can feel it, you can diagnose it, you can navigate what's going on for you. Okay, so because that's the case, is it building up on you? Are you doing it and you're not aware? Is it packing on like a load, right? And it's just like wearing you down. And then you get to the late 30s, early 40s, 50s. You don't know who you are. You don't know who you are. Now, energy vampires, right? That's one of the questions from Jason. How do you deal with energy vampires? Well, there's a thing. If I am completely balanced and, to some degree, and I'm aware, self-aware of myself, and I'm knowledgeable about who I am as a person, I'm not looking to project my energy onto anybody. I know that I have my own issues and I got to deal with myself, okay? So then you take the opposite extreme. Somebody that doesn't know who they are. They're overwhelmed. They don't have the tools. They don't know how to deal with their own pain or whatever it might be. And they're looking for targets constantly. And they see you and you're a target. Okay, so then they project their energy onto you, right? That's a vampire. They project because it feels like they're sucking your energy out. Well, really what they're doing is just burdening you with theirs. Okay, so all you have to do is have four. You have to realize you have four traits, okay? So if you are being a victim of energy vampires, you're a loving person, you're a caregiver, you're perceived as emotionally stable, and your boundaries that you have with yourself are a little bit unclear. So all you got to do for the energy vampires is this, Jason. This is what you got to do. Be plugged into yourself when you're around them. Don't unplug from yourself when you're around them. The way you can kind of think about it conceptually is that I can either have my emotions in my body or I can have somebody else's. Okay, one or the other. That's the way you can kind of think about it. And so if I have my own emotions within myself and I know that how I'm feeling, I'm tired or I'm happy or I'm excited or I'm sad or whatever it is, those are mine and I'm with it. And I'm plugged into me and I'm around these vampires and I'm with myself. They cannot drain you. They cannot. It's impossible. Now, if you're unplugged from your emotions, that's where it happens. That's where they start to drain you and you're not with yourself. They project. It gets all crazy. So you have to be plugged into your emotions. Okay, so that's the key. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, certain environments that we come into, whether it's work or a family dynamic or a social environment or whatever it might be, we have to realize like, okay, I'm somebody that is not the norm of maybe the people I'm dealing with, and I can quickly unplug from myself and absorb to understand and diagnose my surroundings. Okay, so you have to first acknowledge that. And then when you go into an environment, you have to say, okay, am I going to allow this to happen because I need to understand my environment and I need to navigate it because it's kind of like rocky or it's new or it's something that's scary or it's the first time in a job. Okay, then you can navigate it. Or is it something that's like, I don't need to because I know these people, I know who they are, I'm safe here, and I can relax and I can just be plugged into myself. And that's the way you have to like understand and accept it. Now, the reason why I read that quote about malice scorned, right, is if you just ignore it from people, right, if you just ignore their malice and their scorned vibe, it goes away because you're present with yourself. But if you argue with it and if you engage in it and if you get pissed off about it and you like jump to conclusions about it, you get all frustrated about it, then it gives it sort of a validation that somehow you deserve to hold this pain for somebody else. I got news for you. It is nobody's job to hold anybody else's pain. Nobody's. It is the individual's job to hold their own pain. No organization, no individual, Nobody. It's nobody's job to hold anybody else's pain. You hold your own pain, and you go through your own learning, your own growth, your own acceptance, your own change, your own progression. Anybody that lashes out at a previous job, or somebody that they came into contact with, and feels somehow that it's like they feel empowered to like lash out and be scorned. It's just like they're barking up the wrong tree. It will never happen for them. It will never happen. All that will happen for that person who's got their own dysfunctional stuff is that it will grow, and it will just leak out into other areas of their life. They'll never be happy. They'll never have relationships they want that are appropriate. They'll have drug and alcohol issues. They'll engage in behaviors and jobs that are not good for them. They'll always do stuff that's inappropriate for them, and they'll blame everybody else. And they'll blame people that actually cared about them. You know what I'm saying? Like, they'll blame people that were really heartfelt and trying to help them. But it's like, it doesn't matter, So go about your life. You guys that are watching this, you understand that you're somebody that unplugs from yourself to navigate your environment and absorb energy. Okay, good. That's good. I do the same. I do it too. But I can turn it on, I can turn it off. So next week, I'm going to talk about how to turn it on and turn it off. So you guys can do this, and you can turn it off and relax. It's on and off, on and off. Empath strategies. That's what's up. Thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully this helped a little bit. It's a lot of craziness, especially nowadays with all this stuff happening around the world. We can absorb pain from people to understand them, but it's not our job to hold their pain. It's our job to do a corrective emotional experience and redirect it back to them with love and empathy so they don't feel alone in it, and we can feel and understand that person. But after that, it's up to them, and it's up to us, because we feel their pain. We know what they're going through. How beautiful is that? I can tell what somebody's going through because I can feel it. Wow. Huh. The world changes that way. That's how the world changes. That's it right there. No other way. Connect with yourself. Know who you are. Feel who you are as an individual. And then you can feel what other people are going through. You don't want them to be suffering. You want them to have pain. That's how this changes. Thanks you guys for watching. Pura vida. See you next week. I'll keep going with this stuff. It's crazy, right? As a preview to my book. Hope you guys will get it soon. Empath Strategies. Pura vida.